it's just inescapable that in today's culture that science carries a lot of sway. That if you just say, well, latest scientific research shows, people are going to listen, and it may have diminished some over the years, but nonetheless, science has a platform. That would seem to translate into a great need for the pastorate to be very scientifically literate. How have you found that playing out?
Yeah, well, I know that when I was growing up in the church, we were told, don't think too much, just go with your heart. But that just doesn't get any traction today. As a pastor, I've got young people in my church who are either in high school or college who are having supposed scientific information presented to them that allegedly makes the Bible look false and Christianity look ridiculous. And so I think it became necessary for me to at least gain some knowledge of science. And it was when I discovered RTB that it actually brought me up to speed very quickly. And just today's new reasons to believe, the podcasts, they're very easy.
It's almost like, okay, there's this need in my church. People are asking these questions, and as a pastor, the leader, you've got to be able to interact intelligently, even though you may not be a science expert. You've got to understand the issue.
You've got to at least understand the vocabulary. Right. You have to be able to at least know what your reference points are. So to be able to refer people to the Reasons to Believe website and books and so on, to be able to help them, to be able to understand some of the basics of science, I think is now, it's mandatory. It's mandatory for every pastor. It's the jungle that we're trying to reach. These are the natives, this is their language.
And this is where a lot of the attacks and challenges to Christianity come. I mean, they're cased in, science says that religion and Christianity in particular is irrelevant and obsolete.
Are opposites, and you're either one or you're the other.
Right.
And of course, when I was a young earther, we were told that the science project was essentially corrupt, that science was essentially blinded by their sin and they were distorting the data. And when you actually come across, the resources of RTB, you realise that no, science completely concords with Scripture. It comports perfectly with the biblical record.
Well, and I find that position that science is corrupt difficult to tenet because there's a lot of scientists that I worked with that were strong Christians, and so it's an inconsistent position based on my experience.
And of course, Scripture encourages us to be scientific.
Right.
It encourages us to consider the heavens. It encourages us to look to the heavens, that they display the glory of God. Right. Romans chapter 1 says people are without excuse, basically for scientific reasons.
Well, and the first command, be fruitful, rule over, multiply, be fruitful, multiply, rule over, fill the earth. How do we rule and subdue the earth without understanding how it works?
Sure.
Science is that tool.
Yeah. So when you actually look at the whole of Scripture, you understand that it doesn't discourage science, it actually encourages science. And so being able to draw on the work of yourself and Hugh and Fuzz and Ken to be able to see how science and Scripture declare the glory of the one God. Right. And they are two books speaking about the same thing, God and His glory and His redemptive plan. So I think it's just necessary now for every pastor to have some scientific literacy, to be able to share with people in his church, particularly young people who are off to college, who are being bombarded with anti-Christian messages all the time. And just sometimes it's just a simple thing to say, there is another scientific way of looking at this same thing, and yet it believes in the God of the Bible.
Right. I think that's a good point, is that very often, today's culture, science is portrayed as an enemy of the Christian faith. And if we're going to equip people in congregations to deal with that, we've got to be scientifically literate. We've got to be able to address those issues. And as we do it well, ultimately it will strengthen the faith of those who are Christians. And that's an important thing to do.